Buzz. The first item is that we have indications that your landing site obliques are not in the proper position. If you will check, we think that the intermediate scale landing site oblique is stowed in the CSM Lunar Landmarks book. We think that the large scale landing site oblique is stowed in the back of the LIM Lunar Surface Map book. Over.
It has been exactly 1 calendar year since Space Force 44's only passenger, Geoff Johnston, was launched into the deepest recesses of our galaxy, never to be seen or heard from again. Now, drifting alone in space, unsure of what is happening on his home planet of Earth, and always a little bit sad and a little bit horny, Geoff makes desperate attempts to contact Earth. Will anyone answer his call? Will anyone help him get home? Hello, this is... Hello.
What's going on? I'm trying to look at my Pinterest boards on city planning.
Oh, Pinterest boards, city planning.
Yeah.
I know who this is.
Who am I?
Is this Jason Roberts, the fanciful emperor of Oak Cliff?
I prefer Emperor, yes, absolutely.
Texas?
Imperial Overlord would be great.
Well, how are you, man? It's nice to come across you. It's Geoff. It's your buddy Geoff.
Yeah, Jeffrey with 2 F's. Jeffrey.
Yes.
Jeffrey with 1 F. Jeffrey.
Yeah, but then there's the equation part of it where it's like
great times time.
Yeah. Yeah. I just remember when I was in high school learning that equation, and the kid behind me was a big Pixies fan, and he was just like whispering it into my neck. And this was before I'd heard that song or was even aware of the Pixies. What is this guy? He's really into this new math stuff we're learning. But yeah, it's me, Geoff.
Where are you?
Oh, I'm in space, as you do.
Okay.
I don't know. I woke up a few days ago, and I'm in this spacecraft, and there's the signage in the spacecraft says Space Force 44, property of the U.S. government, and so I guess I'm in a Space Force craft, but that's all I know. Like, I got a jumpsuit with my name on it, and but that's about it. And you know me, I don't know anything about flying ships or space.
But it sounds about right. Space and Geoff. Yeah, I can see that totally. That could happen.
You can.
Yeah, how long have you been there, by the way?
I don't know. I talked to my friend Ben, and he was able to look into my mouth and tell me it had been about a year. I don't know how, but yeah.
I know. I totally know how, but I don't. Yeah.
Oh, you know how? Okay, don't tell me. I don't want to spoil it. Yeah. But what are you doing, man? What's up with you? Are you in the cliff right now?
Yeah, I'm in Oak Cliff still. I'm trying to manage. I don't know if you know much about this whole Corona world that we're living in right now.
I heard.
So we're all living the lockdown right now. But I have somehow figured out ways to do random projects while being locked down. So not completely locked down.
This thing can bring the world to a halt, but it can't stop Jason Roberts. Yeah, that's something about you, man. Like, you're always doing 18 things at once.
I found channels for my ADHD, and now it's off the charts.
Is it ADHD? I always thought it was just a lot of cocaine.
Well, it's kind of I'm sure the H in ADHD stands for, it's like the Latin word for cocaine.
So, well, what are you doing to pass the time in the lockdown there?
So,
and wait, maybe before you tell me, just, I like to kind of open up these conversations in case someone happens to listen to them later on down the line. So, as we mentioned, you're in Oak Cliff, and maybe let's give some people a little context about what that means, who maybe only know what it is to Dallas or What is an Oak Cliff?
Yeah, so Oak Cliff's a neighborhood. It is, if you cut Dallas up into quadrants, it is the southwest quadrant of Dallas, Texas. Historically, it's had a bit of a stigma. When I grew up in the northern suburbs of Garland and Richardson and Plano, even, it was, thought of, if it was kind of synonymous with like absolute gang warfare. And I think part of the reason it had a bit of a stigma is there were some bad folks that were from the neighborhood. So Bonnie and Clyde are from Oak Cliff. Lee Harvey Oswald is from Oak Cliff. So, but then you also have the badassery of Lance Armstrong was born in Oak Cliff. So
didn't he use steroids?
Copious amounts of steroids that he denied for many years. And I think the cool thing about the dude was he opened up a cafe / bike shop called Juan Pelota in Austin, which stands for in Spanish, one ball. Cancer, and he had the ball locked up. And if you know about me, I'm also part of the Wrecking Ball crew.
This is true.
One, so along some infamous company, you have Lance Armstrong, me, Adolf Hitler. I mean, just list goes on and on.
Adolf Hitler only had one ball,
from what I understand, but I never really did any testing.
So you and Lance Armstrong together have 2 balls.
But together we make one man. Yes.
And he's a lot of man, so I don't know what that says about you.
It doesn't say much about me. No, the problem too is it kind of acts like a rudder now. So when I swim, I just go in circles.
I had a buddy in high school who, at parties and social engagements, when there was just free-form conversation going on, he was committed to trying to start a rumor that Kurt Loder from MTV News only had one ball.
Interesting.
And he did it a lot and was passionate about it. Like, it was his thing.
It's interesting being down to a lone ball. It's one of those things before you are in that club, you always think, oh man, that would suck. That'd be, I can't imagine what would that be like. I think it'd be so weird. And then when you're in it, you're just like, you don't even, it's not one of those things, because you're not even noticing when you're sitting right now, like, oh, I've got 2 healthy, sturdy, constantly jostulating and moving up and down testicles, unless you're doing some kind of long distance bicycle riding, which Lance Armstrong probably was very notable for him.
Yeah, balls are weird because especially when you get older and they're like droopy and stuff. There have been times when I've just been scratching myself and been like, wait, how many balls do I got again? Like, they kind of just come and go sometimes. They're not like, it's not like when you're a kid and they're like two distinct orbs of flesh at the base of your penis. They're kind of just a mound after a while.
They just all kind of go together. Yeah.
I'm glad we're talking about this.
I am too.
So the
city planning, you want to?
So anyway, speaking of having one ball, you're looking at city planning stuff on the Pinterest. What are you doing there? Because before we were talking about Oak Cliff, so it's in the quadrant there.
Southwest quadrant. Historically, stigma as a bad part of town. It's becoming more this more gentrified-y history kind of spot now. But also still has retained quite a bit of its kind of edginess. But I think in a kind of, it's now flipped that over to the cool side of town. It's kind of like Compton used to probably be, they're proud of their edginess, and then all of a sudden they started seeing like old white ladies walking dogs down the street, and they're like, what the hell? Like, my street cred is really just like out the window. But they're also kind of like, I guess it's kind of cool. Like, I don't know.
Well, and Oak Cliff has some beautiful architecture. A lot of the homes down there, and
it's got lots of old trees and hills, and I like old homes. That's the reason why I came out here. And to be honest, I came out here because I like old homes and old buildings, and looked at East Dallas. And I was in my 20s, and those were way too expensive. And then I was married at the time to a wonderful lady, and she her grandfather lived in Oak Cliff, and he had said, It's great. He lived there for 50 years. He loved it. I went out there, and I worked at IBM too. And all of the younger gay couples who were getting married were all like they were when they were single, they were in Uptown, and then when they got married, they all get married and moved to Oak Cliff. And so I happened to have this random assortment of a lot of like newly married gay friends. I worked at IBM at the time, and so I'd go to these porch parties in Oak Cliff, and so it was this mix of like my wife's grandfather and these kind of well-to-do dinks, dual income, no kids folks. And then I was like, oh, cool old homes. And it's kind of like not what I was told. And so then moved out here and really thought it was kind of a cool spot and started doing lots of random weird projects.
So talk about the streetcar project. Was that your first big thing?
So just the backstory on that, the streetcar was I started researching the history of Oak Cliff, fell in love with the old buildings, and then realized it used to be an old streetcar suburb, and there are streetcars everywhere. Like most cities around the country, they all had these streetcar systems. And at some point in time, I was like attending these community meetings, and people were talking about how do we get people to move back to Oak Cliff. People say we need a Chipotle. We get a Chipotle, everybody's gonna move back to Oak Cliff. And I was like, well, I got an idea. Why don't we bring back the streetcar system? Everyone's like, that's crazy. It's been gone for half a century.
That's not going to give people salmonella. Let's get a Chipotle in here. What are you talking about, a streetcar?
Absolutely. So at some point, people said I was crazy, and then I went home that night, and since I can make websites, I made a fake website called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority that looked really official, and I copied all these architectural websites, and I had official looking trams from Europe in the front. I had like a fake board and history and news and all that. And then the Dallas Morning News did a story about streetcars coming back, and this group called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority that was bringing it back. There wasn't really a group; it was just me. But I said
you and a website.
You and a website. But I had a bunch of people in the neighborhood like, "Hey, we're doing a streetcar. It's really cool. I want to get involved." And and my philosophy on all of these things, Geoff, I don't know if it's a good philosophy or not. My philosophy was like, it's probably going to fail, but I'm going to learn a lot. And I don't care. So the nice thing on the streetcar is like, I'm going to fly to Portland. I'm going to meet the folks that started their streetcar. Because, these are not rock stars, right? But when you start, I'm surely fascinated by them. So I'm like, oh, you're the guy that started the streetcar. And then there's this guy, Rick Gustafson, nice guy, who started the streetcar in Portland. He's like, well, someone actually thinks I'm cool. It's like in the indie rock world, when you tell everybody that you like some one weirdo and everyone's like, who the hell cares?
It's all relative to interest.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's amazing whenever you start connecting with people like that aren't used to people giving them any adulation at all, how much they are very excited to have conversations with you and show you things. And so what happened on that was weird because the guy who started that happened to be best friends with like a state congressman named Blumenthal, who's fairly well known for transportation issues. And at the time, the economy had cratered in 2008. And then there was this stimulus grant that came out to try to get money into shovel-ready projects, infrastructure project. That always happens. You always hear about infrastructure projects. And this guy, Rick, and his friend Blumenthal had started a lobbying group to try to get federal money, and I didn't know what lobbying I knew it from movies and stuff, but I didn't know what lobbying. And so he asked, do you want to be part of our lobbying group? I was like, well, yeah. And I think we only had like $5,000 we ever raised in our account. And we mainly made t-shirts and buttons and things like that with it. But the smartest money I ever spent was I put $1,000 into this little lobbying group and applied for this grant. And we had 0.3% chance of getting any money at all. And we won millions of dollars and brought the streetcar back. I was told it'd take 25 years. We got it back in 5 years. But the legacy part of that is, and here's what's interesting, is like I did not push the streetcar as a transportation project. I pushed it as an economic development project because that's what I was seeing was that this was actually affecting economics and getting more small businesses on the ground, but more specifically on my love of city planning. It was getting you back to these, they're called zero lot line buildings, but it's the classic Main Street where the buildings are right up to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Right now, we're used to kind of more the suburban form. Setbacks, parking lots in front of these buildings, wide. Well, but the classic Main Street that you have in your mind is this, what they call zero lot line buildings, buildings right to the edge, wider sidewalks, tree line, all this stuff. And we have a lot of that. And so the streetcar kind of helps promote that return to that development form. And the reason that development form, I know this is boring, the reason that that's important is that actually is what fosters or enables walkability, which is this terribly unsexy term, but is at the core of most everything that I am typically trying to advocate for. So the problem with that now is Oak Cliff now has become this hyper gentrified and people coming in and prices, all the stuff you hear about, all those things. But that was not the situation when I started the streetcar project. We were just like, well, someone started Chipotle here, so totally different conversation. But that's my streetcar story.
So yeah, it was basically to make it more like this thing that kind of connects neighborhoods to businesses and is a thing you can hop on and off and get around and walk around a little bit, because there is on Jefferson where the Texas Theater is. That is sort of a shopping area that you could feasibly go store to store to store.
Yes. Former streetcar line, by the way.
Former streetcar line. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, so that was kind of the story there, because I ran the Texas Theater for a short time and had 650 seats, but only 35 parking spaces. And so the only reason that worked was because there was a streetcar system. That's how everyone got there.
We could do a whole conversation on streetcars, but that was just your first big jam, and then you were doing.
No, that wasn't my first big jam.
Oh no,
big jam was Art Conspiracy. And
okay.
And so here's the little iterations. So I played in this nerdy rock band that you know about, and
the
did that.
Mullets.
The sloppy mullets, and I wanted to get in the Texas Theater. It had been closed for 10 years. I met the group that ran it, and I really just selfishly wanted to be able to play with our band in that place. But I also really wanted to I dreamed about throwing a big kind of art party, art festival-y kind of thing, like what I saw happening on the East Coast and West Coast.
Art parties.
Something that was just kind of irreverent, fun, big, in a space that was kind of raw. I liked those kind of things that I was seeing and happening in cool cities that didn't seem to happen in Dallas. And so got together with a friend of mine named Sarah Jane Simrod, who is now program director at KXT.
The local NPR affiliate.
Local NPR affiliate. And she and I kind of birthed this thing where we had 100 artists come in and get all canvases one night. The next night we turned it into the theater into a giant art gallery, and that was my excuse to use the theater. And I just kind of helped create this organization with my friend Sarah Jane. And then but I also got me to know the board that was trying to fix the theater, and they needed all this money, and I didn't have any money. But I said, hey, I want to help. Within 3 months, I became the president of the Texas Theater. So I tell people, be careful when you say you want to help, because they will literally do what you say. And that's what I think that the dirty secret of nonprofit boards is, how do I get involved? I get the boards. If you just show up, everyone's gonna be like, thank God, fresh meat, Right.
Because it's such a pain in the ass. All you're doing is pushing all day, asking for money.
Begging for money. And nobody wanted to give money to this theater. People were just like, why would we give it to, we're in the bad side of town and associated with Lee Harvey Oswald. And I thought it was cool. It's it's infamous, right? And, but there wasn't a screen when we got the theater. So I found a screen in someone's backyard. We hung up the first screen in the theater again after 10 years, got a sound system for it. We didn't have a sound system initially. So we bought pianos and started showing silent films. And then we just exhausted the Charlie Chaplin catalog, and then we got a sound system. And then, fortunately, smarter people than me saw because I was an indie music guy. I wasn't an indie film guy, but I knew this needed to be an indie art house film theater. And I'm like, and you're an indie musician. You're like, we're kind of in a similar orbit, so I can kind of fake it. I know who Kurosawa is. I couldn't tell you his films, but I know who Fellini is. I might be able to name one film, but because I can name one or two films, I can talk the talk a bit and fake my way through it till somebody who knows what they're doing would be like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. And that's what happened. And I, actually my friend Stuart Sykes, who, well-known engineer, music engineer, he took over president. Actually, and the guy who now heads it and actually owns it now is Barack Epstein. Does a great job, programs it. He's like the face.
Yeah, he's great.
He kept emailing me because his kid, he's like, I want to get involved. Oh, how can I help? I think I can help program. And I was like, who's this weirdo? And I kept like ignoring him because we get so many people. When it's an old, infamous historic theater, you get a lot of weirdos reach out to you. So you're always vetting these weirdos, right?
So you thought Barack was
a weirdo. I was just
was one of these weirdos.
Like whatever. Fortunately, Stuart, he took over after me and was president for about a year. He actually answered his calls more and brought him in and wisely, let the guy take over. And that's the story of, I think, the success of the Texas now. It heavily falls on the shoulder of Barack.
Yeah, so like you go in and you have like the energy to bring people in that want to see these things kind of rejuvenated or see an idea through, and they come in with like the brooms and the elbow grease. They get the thing going, and then you can kind of, once it gets to critical mass and you're like, you're going to figure out I'm a fraud at any moment, then you've got it moving enough that you can get a real conductor in the train to drag it home.
It's kind of been the story of my life. And so it's been this ability to be like, oh, this could be cool. I generally know the bones of what it needs to make it look cool. I'll start working on it, and hopefully somebody who's smarter than me that knows that what I'm trying to do and knows the proper way to do it will be like, yeah, I get it. And then I'll take over like, thank God. Like, and so selfishly, it's not because I want the attention for the projects, which I don't mind. That's great stuff. But I honestly just want to have the cool stuff. I want a cool art house in my neighborhood that I can walk to. And so, but I will say most anything, and because I've done a bunch of projects, but I am always kind of the Forrest Gumpy, falling forward, jumping into these weird situations. But if there's one skill that I've developed with time, is like finding the right partner who is the analytical, smart person, And so that would, with Our Conspiracy, that'd be Sarah Jane Simrod. With the Streetcar was my friend Luis Salcedo, who was an engineer who did the feasibility study that we needed. And if it's Oddfellows the restaurant, it was Matt Spillers and Lady Amy Cowan, my friend. If it's a Better Block, it would be Krista Nightingale, who's my managing director. So I can constantly point to that person. I think Steve Jobs calls it you hired good lieutenants or something like that. But yeah, I'm constantly the fraud that's just like, I think this is supposed to be an art house theater.
Well, and the thing I liked about Our Conspiracy was that it was by design sort of communal, because you touched on it a little bit, but what would happen is you guys would have a space, and then I think like, maybe a charity or something, and then you'd get a bunch of canvases and then hand them out to local artists and musicians and creative people. And some of them wildly talented and professional, and some of them, just as talented or marginally talented, but just wasn't their thing. But it still felt cool because it was, the drummer from a band or the cool waitress down at the diner, But it was like just people from not just Oak Cliff, but also Dallas proper. And then you'd have the big party, the big event, and bands would play, and you'd auction off the art. So that, like, I'm just trying to give some explanation. Like the whole event of it was really cool, and that stuff started happening when I was getting old and settling down and not going out much. But I would always, I missed a couple of them later on. But that's what those are those things that, like, when you get old and you stop going to every show that your friend's band is playing, something like that is something you make a point to go to, because it is more social, and you get to see all this art, and you see all these people you haven't seen since the last one. So there's a lot of talk about it, especially in Dallas. I mean, that a scene is difficult to sustain itself, and I've seen it living there for, at least when I was involved in music and stuff. It was usually there were just not enough participants. There were more musicians than there were audience. You'd have more people on stage than in the crowd, and so like that was a problem. And then there's scenes within scenes, or the scenes were too segmented, and it just wasn't enough people there and feeling like they were part of it. And then I thought that in itself sort of brought about a certain amount of resentment, like and drama and nonsense that you wouldn't see in other scenes, because there wasn't a lot of it got better, but for a while in the late 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't a lot of like support of each other. It was a lot
I think that was the thought. You kind of hit on it. You and I were in this kind of weird niche indie rock band scene. I mean, and you were kind of in the heart of it, because you were in Louisiana, not far from kind of the nucleus of that little Elephant 60 thing that I was so inspired by. And I couldn't find many people in Dallas that had that as a frame of reference. And so whenever I'm on stage trying to pull out banjos and accordions, but not trying to play folk music, it's people don't understand what you're doing. But I'm like, there's a little group like in Ruston who would think it's so cool.
Yeah, I think that with Dallas, part of the problem is it is too much wanting to be either LA or New York, and so it ends up aping a lot of the cool things instead of figuring out what its thing is. Like, what is our thing? Like, what is the thing
that was part of the premise on Art Conspiracy. It was like, how do we get our own cool, unique kind of art thing? And I will say, you did hit on the goal was to be very egalitarian, to be very, and it's that spirit. I think it's the spirit of the Elephant 60 kind of thing, where they all shared resources and they made these really cool records and they were just all over the map. I mean, there was a lot of it was logistical. We had 100 artists, so we knew 100 artists are going to bring 5 friends to this party, right? So we'll have 500 people at a party no matter what. So rather than that, we thought, well, logistically, it's going to help it be more of a success. But I think what maybe we, in our brains, were like, yeah, I think everyone on network will be cool, but I don't think we realized how powerful that network was. And what it did, it's the same thing that I work on the Better Block stuff. And I will say a lot of the stuff I've done afterwards did kind of follow that model. It crams everything into a small time frame, forces a lot of people to kind of like meet and connect in some hyper creative capacity, and then to kind of throw a giant irreverent party at the end and then go away. and people start getting married out of it, and they're just like they're just start bands or we also were kind of we're adamant, 100 people can apply, and it could be a kid who's 9 years old to an artist who's well established. And I will say, as it became more successful, it was a battle to make sure, because there are people, like Coca-Cola Nokia wants to like sponsor and stuff, and to kind of still retain your punk rocky indie-ness and be like, no, we can't give it to them again. But also realizing like, God, our life would be so much easier if we could just, they have bar taps and they've got bathrooms that function. Probably throw staff at this and maybe even pay us a small of a stipend for all this time and energy. So I don't even know if I'm using the word correctly, but I think the French egalitarian word is what it was attempting to do, and what I feel like it did do, and so I'm proud of it.
And you mentioned Better Block.
So we're going
real quickly. What is that? Let's pretend I forgot what that is.
Okay.
Because I don't see it in my feed every 2 seconds because you're doing something else.
Yeah. So Better Block. So if you're drawn down this path here, so we talked about this quirky rock band starts Art Conspiracy, does the Texas Theater. There's actually started the Streetcar Project. Started a bike group, Bike Friendly Oak Cliff, to support bike infrastructure, to try to get like bike lanes, because I'm like, streetcars would take 20 years, so maybe I get a bike lane in a year. Okay, so, and then the Better Block was kind of the assemblage of everything I had learned to that point, crammed into a city block, thus the Better Block, which I had originally titled, let's call it the Perfect Block, but somebody who was much wiser than me, a friend of mine named Molina, she said, maybe not Perfect Block, maybe call it the Better Block. And I was like, well, alliteration alone makes that
always with alliteration.
Yeah. So
Good. That's a good call. That was a good call on her part.
Very good call. Yeah, because you can't really defend the perfect block.
Wait a minute. This is not perfect.
Exactly. So, and so the idea really, I mean, to be honest, it was just like looking at this really cool looking old buildings, but looking at it and being like, man, how come this doesn't look like that cool street in New York or Paris that has like the bodega out front with the fruits and vegetables, and it has like the cool record store next to it, and then it has the bookstore, and it has the bike shop, and it has the string lights in between it, and has the the maps and directory and all the stuff that you associate with the cool parts of the city, right? That you like, and that's what really I was trying to figure out a way, because there was a group that was doing something called Parking Day, and it was in San Francisco, and they were taking a parking space, putting money in the meter, and instead of putting a car there, they turned it to a park. They put a bunch of plants, and it was kind of ingenious. And I thought, well, that's great. You can do it with a parking space, but what happens if you take a city block and you need more than just that green space? Because they're in San Francisco, where like the buildings are already cool, the sidewalks cool, the streets already cool, everything pretty much works. Now they're just like, we just need some more grass, right, to sit in. I was missing the building and the sidewalk and the right scaled street, all that stuff. Oh, and okay, and to back up too a little bit with Better Block. I realized, I think this is probably when I'm 30-ish or so, like, I know what I should have done when I was 20, 21, 22. I should have studied urban planning, city planning. That's because, we don't know what we want to do until we're like 30. And even then we're not even sure. And that's what I realized, like, and my dad was really my dad's a big reader, and he reads everything. And he was the one that kind of was like, hey, it seems like you like cities a lot. I fell in love in New Orleans. I was like, when I was a kid, I was like, what is this weird place that has like, a Catholic church next to like a strip club, next to a voodoo lounge, next to an herbicide shop, whatever. And I was like, and then people dance and sing in the street. It's like, this is some magical Narnia that makes no sense to me. It was light and dark, and as my dad, I was just like, oh, you like cities. That's what you like. And I was like, I don't like cities. I don't know. And he's like, no, you're trying to reverse engineer the stuff you like in these cities. I'm like, that is what I'm trying to do. So I had this realization I should be a city planner. And then after that, I was like, well, shoot, I wasted my time. I've got 2 kids now. I'm not going to go back to school. If I did that, I have to get finish my degree, which I never finished. I think I only passed badminton anyways. And then I was like, I'm going to have to get a master's degree. Now, by this time, I'll be like 35, 36, and I don't even have the patience for any of that stuff. Then I'll maybe get on a firm, and then I'll be like below intern, and I'm going to have to like do really crappy work for 5 years. And then maybe when I'm 50 years old, I might get to work on some kind of cool city project. And so I realized that it's not the way I operate, and so maybe I'll just go out in the street and paint a bike lane. That was my way of being like, maybe I could short circuit the system and just become an urban planner on my own.
I just like the beautiful irony of you coming down to Oak Cliff and being part of this larger gentrification movement that got all of these other people to come down, and now the place is crowded as fuck and has really nice restaurants, but you can't find a place to park. And then what do? You take the fucking parking places away. You put potted plants in them. That's just beautiful to me. Yes. I love that sort of thing.
Yes, no, they will keep taking them away. Well,
until they have to take a streetcar to get to the places now.
That's kind of the philosophy. Actually, you're so right on. You don't realize how on you are with your assessment. So I do these better blocks, and they're temporary, and transform a space, and we'll paint bike lanes, add cafe seating, put pop-up businesses, coffee shops, bookstores, flower shops, string lights.
And it's you're working with, the property owners, or sometimes the city, whoever needs to be working. It's not like some
absolutely. I'm not
everywhere guerrilla bullshit.
I'm kind of getting their feedback, and well, I will say there's a bit of this though, where when you've done this long enough and you understand city planning, urban planning, what people are looking for in a space, you do. It's kind of like being a doctor. You're like, I generally know the right cocktail of medicines you need and what you're asking for, and you're getting me in the circuitous route to get there. But you're also having to. The tricky part is, and the analogy I tell people, it's like with the built environment we've created, it's built around cars. That's fine. That's how we get around, and we've made things more sprawling. So there was a time when we lived in clusters, little villages, densely packed, and you would have lived intergenerationally. Like you would have lived it with your grandmother. Probably she would have taken care of your kids, and you would have taken care of her, and then she would have passed away, and then there would have been this cycle, and you didn't really trade property. So why would you do that? I mean, that's how you get little Italies, because you have little cultural districts, because your uncle lives next door and your aunt over here. And at some point in time, though, and the American dream, which I think is fascinating, is all about free agency. That's what the American dream is. And I'm not knocking that. It's fascinating, because what Americans love is this ideal that we are not free agents. And so we get so mad at, like, when LeBron James leaves Cleveland and goes to Miami, right? Like, how could he left Cleveland and all? And he just took his number, and now he's just a floating number around, but if you think about so the American dream is like, you buy a house, you get your 2 cars, and you have kids, but it is antithetical to the idea of a cultural district, right? Because what you're doing there is you're intergenerationally living. You're not trading property. You're not moving on. So people get frustrated with the gentrification, but really gentrification is really just the moving out and buying a house somewhere. And now what they're mad at when they hear gentrification, usually, or the frustrations on that is displacement and a loss of character. Ironically, a lot of that character that people love in these places came from epic segregation. That's another weird byproduct of these places that we love. So Little Italy's great, and I love it, or Chinatown's great, but it was also this segregated enclave that was like, this is your part, do not leave this little 3-block.
It wasn't a group decision.
No.
They just, hey, I got an idea.
Yeah, but we romanticize it, right?
It's not like this will be great to preserve our culture. It's like, this is where we won't get fucking murdered.
That's the irony, is that we oftentimes romanticize the byproducts of segregation.
Right. And then the fact that you would have like a Little Italy within walking distance of a Chinatown, or, like these sort of subcultures that are Venn diagrams, and where they cross, you could have some cross culture, or the fact that they're, the kids of those neighborhoods will play together. Like, those are the things where culture then blends and creates a new culture, where when you have sprawl, you are so separated from the people that are even your neighbors. There's no actual culture anymore. Yeah. There's no, you get together, you watch. I mean, you could argue that the culture is watching a football game and grilling out, but to me, that's the most fucking limp dick, mayonnaise, no fucking culture, boring, like, nonsense anti-culture I've ever been witness to. I think you need a street party where the music is loud and it's salsa music, or it's just got a groove to it. Yeah. Or New Orleans, it's like got horns in the
It's got a language, it's got a food, it's got a music. I mean, that's what I think about why New Orleans to me is so magical. It's like, you can name 10 dishes that are just New Orleans, like muffaletta, jambalaya, shrimp creole, or what? I mean, you can go down the list. Gumbo, it's one after the other. There's no other city you can just list off 10 foods. Maybe in Philadelphia I could be like Philly cheesesteak and Philly cheese spread. Like that's
and whatever they're selling at like a Wawa, like that's regional cuisine, right?
Maybe Hawaii maybe has something like okay and
yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what you're getting at. And so, but you're also something that I remember thinking about too, like the American dream though, is the beauty about it is because it's free agency, it is breaking down the walls of the segregation a bit. It's saying like, well, I don't need to live in this little enclave. And the ideal of it, I think, is that you would mix, but you are so sprawled that you don't actually mix, like you've said. Right. Yeah. You live next to the same dude for 10 years and you do everything you can to avoid them, whenever you're getting out of your car.
Or you all like the same thing and it's just safe, boring nonsense. So what are you going to do? I'm going to go home and watch The Masked Singer and you know,
Yeah.
and then my kids are going to be preoccupied with sports until they're old enough to discover drugs. And I'm going to not satisfy my wife for the 8th week in a row. And we're going to talk about the weather and never politics. And we're not going to engage things that are different than us. And we're going to be afraid of it, and we're going to only listen to the same country music that they play in our grocery store. I don't know. We're getting off on a whole thing now, but it reminds me of a video I saw on the internet. Like I can still see things on my phone, but certain things about this COVID-19 coronavirus are blocked from my phone. But I did see these white ladies getting kicked out of a park. Did you see this?
Getting kicked, white ladies. I don't know if I did see this. Tell me this.
It's like a 40-minute long video on YouTube, and I want to say it's in Boise, Idaho, and the cops are coming down and basically kicking these moms and their kids out of the park because the park's been closed by the city because of everything that's going on. So, but then I had to skim it because as soon as these like privileged moms start talking, I just got infuriated because they just begin challenging the cop. First of all, like the cop can do anything. And he was being really apologetic. He's like, look, I'm sorry. Hopefully we'll have it back up in a couple of weeks. And then they're like taking their fucking stand for American freedom. They're like, no, I don't think so. We're taxpayers. And this is the taxes pay for this, for the park. Are we going to get a refund on our taxes? It's like, shut the fuck up. I'm trying not to say cunt, but
doing a good job.
So imagine if that was anybody but a white woman. They would have been fucking shot on sight, and they would have taken the camera that filmed the whole thing and thrown it in a goddamn volcano. Like the gang of them being snotty to this cop who is just. This is one of the few times you're going to hear me say the cop's just trying to do his job. Like he's not trying to oppress you, white lady. Just fucking just walk, just get on. It made me so fucking mad. But so now, like lately, your venture has been in restaurants, and I think most recently a bar, like a New Orleans themed bar, and then all this stuff happened. And I would assume, like the other small businesses in town, you had to make some decisions and some difficult ones at that. And how did you do that? How did you adapt to the tragedy and adapt a new trajectory?
Yeah, well, it was pretty shitty, and ironically, I had a Better Block project scheduled for the city of Allen, where we were going to create this little main street out of a parking lot, and we had built these fruit and vegetable stalls, and that got canceled. And then I told my team at the restaurant, I was like, we're using these fruit and vegetable stalls, and we're going to turn the outside of this restaurant into a grocery store because grocery stores are essential businesses, and I am so pissed off that like Tom Thumb can somehow figure out a way to make this work, and I'm not allowed to, and I just have to fire everybody. That's not cool. And so, but then of course they did let restaurants stay open for takeout and delivery. But the interesting thing, it allowed us, I mean, if you go to our shop, you see it. It looks like a little New York bodega. I mean, I've got tomatoes and bananas and avocados and all this stuff out front. People come by, they're like, I love this, is great. Like I don't have to go to the grocery store and feel like I'm being crowded by all these weirdos or whatever. And so it gave us a chance to try something we were kind of curious about if that would work or not. And it's been really interesting. I've been making pastries in the morning. I put pastries out. I mean, I've really extended myself here, Jeffy B. And then at Better Block, we fabricate. We've got this fancy digital fabrication equipment. And so we've been using that equipment to make fruit and vegetable stalls out of wood. We have these machines that with computers attached to saws, and they start cutting things out. And we realized, well, we can make anything with this equipment. And so found these guys that were making face shields in Europe and said, well, can we make face shields with our equipment? And found a group in Portland that was starting using the same machines and materials that we had access to. And we were talking with them, and they're like, we actually haven't tried it though. And so we're like, well, we're idiots, we'll try it. So we tried it, and then we were able to mass produce these. We made it in a span of about 3 weeks, 10,000 face shields.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we open sourced the designs, and because it's a nonprofit, and people, doctors in Nigeria, were using it or cutting them out, and in New Zealand, which that's the kind of the cool part of that model. Now, the downside of that model is you're like, oh shit, I see why people copyright things.
The capitalist inside you is just like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, like I'm really losing out here on this. Like, and I could be keeping my staff fed. Damn the greater good,
But you're feasibly, by extension, you're protecting doctors and frontline.
Yeah.
So it's a wash.
I'm sure it's a wash.
And so you've got the restaurant. Are they still putting? So is this like the inventory from the restaurant you're selling, or is it?
Yeah. Well, it started that way. It was started because I bought a ton of inventory for a brunch that got canceled, and so you can imagine the sheer number of eggs you have at that point.
What am I going to do with all these fucking crepes?
Exactly. You have a fairly successful brunch restaurant that's turned off, and you bought all the products for it. So yeah, I mean, we just turned into a grocery store, and then I will say, I mean, 50% of our revenue comes from groceries now. Not been a bad. When we're percentage wise, we're down obviously from where we were before.
Yeah, and still like restaurants struggle anyway. Just
totally.
Every month it's just to keep the lights on when things are going well.
People have this idea, like they see a restaurant or like, oh, this person's like, I mean, maybe if I ran like, on the border, yes, but you're a small like mom and pop restaurant, even if you see it packed and slammed, I mean, you got all that staff and you got all this inventory, and none of us are MBAs, like, so we're just kind of thinking, this is cool, we have a restaurant, we're just happy. But we are literally living, we are 1 month away from just having to close the doors, having a bad, horrible.
And then even if you're doing, this is the thing I'm struggling with. A lot of restaurants, I'm hearing they gotta do the delivery or takeout only. But anybody that's worked in a restaurant knows that the wait staff lives off of tips. Like, so yeah. How does that translate? And I guess it.
I will say
no, it's not a good answer.
Well, no.
You can accuse me of asking you a nasty question if you like, if that would make you feel better.
No. You think it was a perfectly well pointed nasty question? No, Well, a couple of things. One of my business partner is just as like nutty as I am, and took on all these weird street parties like I did. We kind of joined forces. Her name's Amy, and she was actually the one that was instrumental in, like, she was like, I'm gonna have to fire everybody, like, or 90% of our staff right now, and they're all going to file for unemployment, and there's a 10-day waiting period. So Amy's former life was as like a Democratic state party strategy something. Anyway,
some pinko liberal nonsense.
Some pinko liberal-y thing, yeah. And so she gets on the phone with our state congressman, and she's like, I need you to immediately repeal the 10-day waiting period on the unemployment checks. I'm going to let go of my entire staff. I need to make sure they've got money coming in right away. He goes, drafts up that legislation, goes over to Abbott. Now, so our congressman is a Democrat. Texas Democrats don't usually get anything done, right? Abbott, hardcore, what he is, conservative. But in no time, Abbott gets it. So she works with our city council member, Chad West, and state congressman, gets it drafted. And within like 3 days, it's like a tweet from George Abbott, like, I've turned off the 10-day thing. And I was like, holy shit, Amy, you pulled me bar at the restaurant. If there's any kudos in the weirdness that happened shortly after that, I would say my business partner did a lot thinking about, like, what am I going to do? Because I'm going to lay off 40 people here who are, like you said, survive on tips. We were able to bring back a couple, though. But, it's a weird world because it's almost better for them to be unemployment because they can make time. And we're in this weird stage where, only so many people are coming in, even when they say everyone can come back to a restaurant, not everyone's going to running back in the door. And so we're going to be like in this weird hobbly world. And so there's going to have to be some kind of like bridge that allows for these wait staff people to, like, still receive probably some type of an unemployment some type of a subsidy alongside of that the lowered wage they are now receiving. So yeah, it's messy. I think it's forcing everyone to kind of stop and do this hard reset. That's kind of the interest. You're talking about like this lack of culture. I think there's now this desire. Everyone has way too much time to think. We're just like, shit, I don't have a culture. What if I just start? So everyone's baking bread. Like I need to become a digital baker. that's what I should have done all along. So what's going to happen is we're going to have this massive carb overload over the next 3 or 4 months. So like, what were we thinking? All these like gluten filled monstrosities. It's going to be amazing.
What I'm most concerned of, and I haven't really talked to anybody about this because, like I said, I'm just figuring this out, what's going on with everything on the planet Earth. And it's frightening to me, but I do have a lot of distance from it and time alone in space to kind of think about things and process things and think of new questions. And so what I'm worried about is what happens when the chuds surface. So the
Chuds. I don't know if I know the chuds.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Okay. Oh, you mean from yes. The chuds.
When they come out of the sewers and we're all trapped in our homes or too sick to fight them, because I think they've been chomping at the bit to come back, and I think this is all they need.
It's prime. Yeah, this is the time. Yeah, absolutely. If I'm a chud, I'm thinking like, yeah, let's make some hay.
So,
you won't believe this. I got Branson calling me here.
Who?
Talking about the bank thing here.
Who's calling you bank thing?
Branson, the Virgin Airlines dude himself.
Richard Branson.
Yeah, that guy. So I'm gonna let you go.
Well, I need to. Oh, okay, but real quick, could you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to get to this.
Oh,
See Geoff.
Jason Roberts. Jason. Fuck. Well, okay, that's 3 for 3, and appears I missed several windows of opportunity. I really need to start asking these people for help at the beginning before we start a conversation, and then so I guess that's it. That was my friend Jason Roberts. Wasn't that neat? He's a good dude, and if you are so inclined, you can check out the Better Block Foundation. Go to teambetterblock.com for ideas on what to do for your city, town, village, burg, inlet, when people are allowed to congregate outdoors again. If you're in the downtown Dallas or Oak Cliff area, maybe go down to Oddfellows in the Bishop Arts District of Oak Cliff and grab some eggs. Or, wherever you are, get on the Facebook or wherever and see where there's some alternatives to getting stuff you might normally get at the grocery store. If you can support those small businesses in your area in any way. Also, if you're within the sound of my beautiful, sultry voice, please do me a favor and share this podcast or any of the assets on our YouTube page, or Instagram, or Twitter, wherever we are. You can find us at The Passenger Pod. Transmitting distress calls to Earth from Space Force 44. My name is Geoff, and I am the passenger, saying thank you for listening now more than ever.